The Anglo Saxons liked to fight a lot. They got a lot of cool weapons and armor then, so I'm gonna show some of this and mention all the different types of weapons and armor they used. I'd like to use live action to like demonstrate it, but if I did it live, then that would probably kill people, and that's bad. So I'm gonna use comical illustrations with this guy. He's a pretty angry guy. I'm gonna call him Wigloaf because that was a pretty popular name back then. I actually lied. I don't think anyone was named Wigloaf. Anyway, he's holding the spear, which was the most common Anglo-Saxon weapon. Some spears had broad heads and some spears were really thin to slip between chainmail. They used two types of spears. One was the angon, or the Roman pilum. That's what the Romans called it, and soldiers usually carried more than one and threw it at their enemies. It was usually thrown from about 30 to 40 paces away at a big charging horde that I'm not going to draw because it takes a lot of time to draw a charging horde. They also used a thrusting spear, which had two wings on the shaft in some cases, and those were used to hook soldiers' shields and other soldiers' spears and pull them away so that was easier to kill them. Slaves weren't allowed to carry the spears, and if they got caught, they got beaten with sticks until the stick broke. And the spears were popular because they were pretty cheap. Swords, on the other hand, those were real expensive, and so they were a lot more rare than spears, and only the wealthy had them. And it was passed on from father to son or as a gift to or from a great warrior. The softer steel was in the middle to absorb the force of the blow, and it was harder on the outside to cut people up. The Anglo-Saxon swords was for hacking. Didn't really stab people much, but it didn't cut chainmail. It just kind of crushed whatever was beneath and dented the people up pretty bad. But if you didn't have armor, it chopped through you pretty good. The pommels of the swords were usually at the beginning really plain, but once the Anglo-Saxons got into full swing, they got kind of fancy with their swords. They were inlaid with silver and gold, the pommels were, which were usually made of wood or iron. The sword makers sometimes branded their names into the blades of the swords, which seems kind of silly, but whatever. They also had a dagger called a scram-sax, which is where the word Saxon comes from. That was a utility tool as well as a weapon. And the scabbards protected the blade and gave them a place to put the sword. But the wearer had to actually take his sword out of the scabbard to fight or he'd get killed. They were made of wood and wrapped in linen and leather to seal it up. And anyway, axes were pretty imposing weapons. One type of axe was a Francisca. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but it was a throwing axe used in a lot the same fashion as the angon. And then the other type of axe that they used was the broad axe, which had a thinner blade to make it lighter and to cut flesh. It was 4 to 5 feet long. Problem with that was it had a heavy weight on the end, and it was easy to overcommit your blows, and that could get you killed. But it scared people, and if you fought a skilled spearman, it could you could get disarmed, and that generally meant you were dead. Long range, they had bows and slings, but those were used primarily for hunting, because it was seen as more honorable to use a spear, which doesn't make much sense, but whatever. They stuck with their angons and franciscas. Armor, They had chainmail, which started just to cover the upper torso and the shoulders, but then it later fell down to the knees and had long sleeves. It took a long time to make the suit, but I guess it was worth it. Took a whole year sometimes. And the helmets they used varied. Some had like goggle-like eyes, but those went out of fashion pretty quick because the soldiers realized they looked ridiculous. And most of them just were domed with a nose guard, and they were all riveted together. But the most expensive ones, they weren't riveted, they were one piece, and that made them pretty expensive. Not all the helmets were made out of metal. Some had bone plates in the metal frame, which I guess that's what they liked. Then they had chainmail coifs, which were used to protect the head, and they were also called Heelsbjorgs. I'm not really sure which is easier to pronounce, but eventually they became part of the chainmail itself and just looked like a hood. The last thing they had was a shield, which was made of lime wood because it wouldn't splinter. It was reinforced with iron straps, and it may have been covered with leather. So the iron strips, they pressed up and protected it, and then the leather reinforced it. And they were originally circular, but by the 11th century they became kite shields, which could cover your legs, which make more sense to me. So these are the weapons that the Anglo Saxons used to kill each other with, and they're pretty cool.